Furloughed employees and contractors protested in front of the USAID headquarters after the Trump administration on Monday moved to shut down the agency. Employees have been locked out of its headquarters since Trump ordered a freeze on most US foreign aid hours after taking office. USAID distributes billions of dollars of humanitarian aid around the world. However, Trump has said he wants to ensure it aligns with his America First policy. USAID provided 42% of all humanitarian aid tracked by the United Nations in 2024 and accounts for less than 1% of the total United States budget. Billionaire Elon Musk has had the agency in his sights for closure and is tasked with downsizing the federal government. A senior White House official speaking anonymously said Trump was considering merging USAID into the State Department and had entrusted Elon to oversee the efficiency of this agency.
So this has nothing to do with making the U.S. government more efficient.
Democratic lawmakers stood with protesters in front of USAID headquarters on Monday. Speaking to reporters, Senators Brian Schatz and Chris Van Hollen said they planned to block confirmation of Trump nominees for State Department positions in retaliation, while House Rep Gerald Connolly from Virginia laid out the agency's impact.
It is the lead development agency in the world, and no one elected Elon Musk to dismantle it. We are going to fight in every way we can, in the courts, in public opinion, with the bully pulpit, in the halls of Congress, and here at AID itself.
US Secretary of State Marco Rubio told reporters in San Salvador he was now the acting head of USAID, calling the agency completely unresponsive.
Their attitude is we don't have to answer to you because we are independent, we answer to no one. Well, that's not true, and that will no longer be the case.
Meanwhile, Noam Ungar, an analyst with Washington think tank CSIS, believes the move could come at the cost of the US position in the world.
So the US is actually currently involved in an intense and intensifying competition, a geostrategic competition, largely with China, but also with other adversaries around the world. It actually could have the effect of ceding the battleground or ceding the playing ground, if you will, and others will very enthusiastically fill that void.
The State Department issued worldwide stop work directives after Trump's freeze order, with the exception of emergency food assistance.
I could hear screaming. Next minute, all hell broke loose. There was choppers in the air, the ambos, and the police were running, and it was just... And I just couldn't believe it. And one of the ladies that was down here comforting one of the locals, I've been here 10 years, this has never happened. And it's going to devastate the community.
It shakes. Stop walking.
There are clearly new challenges and growing uncertainties, so the European Union is prepared for a robust but constructive dialogue with the United States. When targeted, unfairly or arbitrarily, the European Union will respond firmly. This weekend, we witnessed how steep tariffs were imposed on Canada and Mexico. Those tariffs raise business costs, they harm workers and consumers. They create unnecessary economic disruption and drive inflation. We do not see much good coming out of this. So we prioritize productive discussions and engage early. At the same time, the European Union remains also steadfast in its multilateral commitments, be it from our development aid to our climate targets.
It's simple. We think the priority is the strategic agenda and the security of our borders. If we are attacked on trade topics, as a power that holds, Europe has to make itself respected and react.
Both the US and Europe benefit from the exchange of goods and services. If customs policy now makes this difficult, it would be bad for the US and bad for Europe. It is clear that as a strong economic area, we can organize things ourselves and can also react to customs policies with customs policies. That is what we must and will do. But the perspective and the goal should be that we proceed in such a way that it amounts to cooperation.
So if the US imposes tariffs on the EU, the big question is what the EU will do in response. If the EU imposes tariffs on the US as well, the implication for the EU economy will potentially be significant, with weaker growth and higher inflation. Being an important trading partner for the UK, that will have implication on the UK as well, because if you have a weaker market there, exports to the EU from the UK will be affected as a result. We'll find it harder to export to the US if our products are going to cost more. And if we're going to retaliate here in the UK, we will also find that our import costs from the US are going to be higher, and that would feed into higher inflation here as well. Some economies will benefit as a result of that trade being diverted, or them having an advantage because their products will be comparatively cheaper as a result. But it's very hard to tell at the moment what the net impact is going to be until you know what the full scale of the tariff war is going to shape up to be.
I think for some people in the U.S., perhaps Donald Trump, they took our kindness for weakness. And we do love our American cousins. But we will not stand by for this type of action to be taken, and we will respond every single time that they take an action. We will respond in kind. Donald Trump's tariffs are going to hurt American families. This is going to have impacts on them. They're the ones who are paying the tariffs. It's going to have an impact on us because maybe we won't be able to sell many of our products the same way to the U.S., but it's going to have direct impact on families in the U.S. And it's going to have impacts on families here who are potentially going to lose their jobs. It makes no sense for this to be happening, but we're here.
U.S. President Donald Trump paused new tariffs on Mexico for 1 month after Mexico agreed to reinforce its northern border with 10,000 National Guard members to stem the flow of illegal drugs. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum told reporters on Monday the agreement includes a U.S. commitment to act to prevent trafficking of high-powered weapons to Mexico.
I told him we wanted him to pause the tariffs. So we reached that agreement. But I also explained to him that the amounts of high-potency weapons that enter from the United States into Mexico is a serious issue.
Trump on social media said the two leaders will have negotiations on the tariffs during the 1-month pause. He also said Mexico sending soldiers to the border will stem the flow of narcotics, fentanyl in particular, as well as curb illegal immigration.
He asked me how long I wanted to pause tariffs. I said forever. He told me how much time. I told him a month. But I'm sure that during this month, we'll be able to deliver good results for his people and the people of Mexico.
The two leaders spoke by phone on Monday as a midnight tariff deadline loomed. U.S. tariffs on Canada and China still remain poised to take effect on Tuesday, as well as retaliatory tariffs. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on Saturday said Canada would impose 25% tariffs on billions of dollars of U.S. goods in response to the U.S. measures. Trump says the tariffs will stay in place until Canada does more to fight illegal migrants and fentanyl smuggling.
U.S. President Donald Trump backed away from his threat to impose a steep 25% tariff on Canada for 1 month, according to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The decision came after the two leaders had a phone call that Trump said went very well, during which Trudeau promised to deploy new technology and personnel along its border with the United States to stop the flow of fentanyl. Just hours earlier, Trump also paused a planned 25% tariff on Mexico after President Claudia Sheinbaum agreed to send 10,000 National Guard members to the border to stem the flow of illegal drugs. She told reporters on Monday the agreement included a U.S. commitment to act to prevent trafficking of high-powered weapons to Mexico.
I told him we wanted him to pause the tariffs, so we reached that agreement. But I also explained to him that the amounts of high-potency weapons that enter from the United States into Mexico is a serious issue.
Trump said Mexico sending soldiers to the border would stem the flow of narcotics, fentanyl in particular, as well as curb illegal immigration.
He asked me how long I wanted to pause tariffs. I said forever. He told me how much time. I told him a month. But I'm sure that during this month, we'll be able to deliver good results for his people and the people of Mexico.
Trump said the month-long suspension would be used to engage in further negotiations. U.S. tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China had been set to take effect at midnight on Tuesday.
For 3 days now, there have been earthquakes all the time, every 5 minutes. It is continuous. They don't stop at all. The entire island is traumatized. We have been looking for tickets for 3 days now. We could not find any for the ferries or the airplanes. They didn't exist. Last night when we tried to book a ticket, the last one was gone. There was nothing. Planes were all booked. They put on some extra flights, but the tickets are really expensive. They have reached 300 to 350 euros per person. You can't find seats. Luckily, we found boat tickets for me, my wife, and the children.
World Health Organization member states are looking at cutting part of its budget by $400 million, according to a document released on Monday. The move comes in light of U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to withdraw his country from the United Nations agency.
And I terminated it.
Opening its annual executive board meeting on Monday, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus defended its work and recent reforms. He also again called on the U.S. to reconsider its exit.
We believe in continuous improvement, and we would welcome suggestions from the United States and all member states for how we can serve you and the people of the world better.
The budget cut will be addressed at the February 3rd to 11th meeting in Geneva as member state representatives discuss the agency's funding and work for the 2026 to 27 period. The newly released document shows the board wants to reduce its base program section of the budget from a proposed $5.3 billion to $4.9 billion. That's part of the originally proposed $7.5 billion budget, including money to eradicate polio and tackle emergencies. The U.S. is the WHO's biggest government donor, contributing around 18% of its overall funding. The agency has already separately taken some cost-cutting steps after Trump's announcement. But the document adds some board representatives also wanted to send a message that the WHO would preserve its strategic direction despite the challenges. Trump moved to exit the WHO on his first day in office 2 weeks ago. The process will take 1 year under U.S. law. On Monday, Tedros also specifically addressed some of Trump's criticisms, including around the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic and the WHO's independence. He said the agency acted fast on the COVID outbreak, adding that the WHO is happy to say no to member states where requests go against its mission or science.
It was a reunion 15 months in the making. Video of the emotional embrace by Gaza twins Ibrahim and Mahmoud Al-Atut has been seen around the world, becoming a visceral image of Palestinian survival amid a grueling war and destruction.
He called out to me, Mahmoud, and I couldn't comprehend. I ran quickly and we hugged each other. Where were you, Ibrahim? Where, my brother? To the point I didn't want to let go of him. It's like the soul returned to the chest. The soul returned to the heart. I couldn't believe I found my brother. I couldn't believe it.
But the brothers had both endured loss and hardship that tinged the joy of the reunion. They spoke about their experience days later in a video obtained by Reuters. The two 30-year-old men from the Jabalia area of northern Gaza were split up early in the conflict. Hamas militants attacked Israel on October 7, 2023, killing around 1,200 people and seizing about 250 hostages, according to Israeli tallies. The Israeli military campaign in Gaza killed more than 47,000 people, according to Palestinian health authorities, leveling much of the enclave. Ibrahim said his house was hit by an Israeli airstrike in November 2023, killing one of his daughters and injuring another. The following months would be spent between hospitals. Ibrahim said he did not want to go south, but Israeli forces had moved towards North Gaza's Indonesian hospital while he was there with his family. The Red Crescent moved them all to a bigger hospital in the south where better treatment was available. Mahmoud stayed in the north. Ibrahim said he went through periods without communication with his brother, not knowing where he was or if anything had happened.
We stayed there, strewn in the cold. There were no beddings, no covers. There wasn't a drop of water. We lived a difficult life there.
The stress of that time caused Ibrahim to lose weight, he said. When news came late one night that he could go north to Jabalia, Ibrahim phoned Mahmoud. Mahmoud described the phone call as a dream. He said he quickly got dressed and rushed to the meeting point on a main road into northern Gaza. As tens of thousands of Palestinians made their way home to the north, Mahmoud said he stood for 6 hours, looking for his twin in the sea of people. The journey was long for Ibrahim. Traveling with his 6 young daughters meant he had to go slowly, and then the ecstatic and tearful embrace. Now reunited, the 2 men and their families are going through the ruins of their family home together.
You passed information you had gathered to those agents of an enemy state. You allowed them to know your personal details and movements, including when you were deployed to an international training operation in the United States of America. You traveled to Istanbul to meet with them, and on 2 occasions you received payment for your services. You are to be sentenced as an adult, having been convicted at the age of 23. And although your offending began when you were 17, you persisted in it for a considerable period. First, you will serve half the sentence for the Official Secrets Act offence. Then you will serve 40% of the sentence for escape. Finally, you will serve 2/3 of the custodial term for the Terrorism Act offence before your case will be referred to the parole board for consideration of whether you should be released before the expiry of the total of the custodial terms. The total sentence is therefore 14 years and 3 months.
The billionaire appointed by Donald Trump to shrink the U.S. government said on Monday he aimed to shutter the globe's premier foreign aid agency. Elon Musk, the founder of Tesla and SpaceX and the owner of the X social media platform, gave an update where he said the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, was, quote, beyond repair. USAID is the world's largest single donor. In fiscal year 2023, the U.S. dispersed $72 billion of assistance worldwide on everything from women's health in conflict zones to access to clean water and HIV/AIDS treatments. It was the source of 42% of all humanitarian aid tracked by the United Nations in 2024 and has a staff of more than 10,000 people. Trump has ordered a global freeze on most U.S. foreign aid as part of his America First policy. Field hospitals and Thai refugee camps, landmine clearance in war zones, and drugs to treat millions suffering from diseases are among the programs at risk of elimination. USAID also sends rescue workers to assist when disaster strikes around the globe. Trump has assigned Musk to lead a federal cost-cutting panel. Speaking broadly about cost reductions, Musk estimated the Trump administration can cut $1 trillion from the U.S. deficit next year. And he asserted that, quote, professional foreign fraud rings are stealing vast sums by masquerading as or creating fake digital U.S. citizens. Musk did not offer any evidence to support his fraud claim or explain how he reached the amount of $1 trillion. Targeting USAID follows on concerns about Musk's access to the U.S. Treasury system, first reported by the New York Times, that sends out more than $6 trillion per year in payments on behalf of federal agencies. That system contains the personal information of millions of Americans who receive Social Security payments, tax refunds, and other money from the government. Democrat Peter Welch, a member of the Senate Finance Committee, called for explanations as to why Musk had been handed access to the payment system and what Welch said included taxpayer-sensitive data. Quote, it's a gross abuse of power by an unelected bureaucrat, and it shows money can buy power in the Trump White House, Welch said in an emailed statement. Trump stated on Sunday night that Musk has his support.
Panama's President Jose Raul Molino stressed that sovereignty over his nation's namesake canal is not up for debate after a meeting with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Sunday.
The sovereignty of Panama is not up for debate. That is very important. There is no doubt that the canal is operated by our country, and it will continue to be so. I do not think there has been a discrepancy in that.
Panamanians took to the streets to protest Rubio's visit, displaying posters of him dressed as a Nazi and others of Trump, labeling him a fascist. Union leader Saul Mendez expressed his displeasure with Trump. He wants to annex Canada. He wants to invade Mexico. He wants to take the canal. He wants to rip Greenland away from Denmark. Trump is looking for World War III, he says. Trump has repeatedly insisted the U.S. must retake the canal due to his claims of undue Chinese influence, which Rubio reiterated during the meeting, according to the State Department. The Panamanian government has vehemently denied ceding operation of the canal to China and insists it administers the canal fairly to all shipping. Though the canal itself is operated by Panama, the two ports on either side are run by publicly listed Hong Kong company CK Hutchison. Other ports nearby are operated by private companies from the United States, Singapore, and Taiwan. The two sides did see more eye-to-eye on migration, with Molino suggesting a possible expansion of an existing agreement with the U.S. that could pave the way for more direct deportations of non-Panamanian migrants who cross the Darien Gap on Panama's southern border with Colombia. Over the past few years, the area has seen a surge of people bound for the U.S. He insisted, however, that the U.S. government would need to cover the cost. Rubio's trip to Panama marks a first stop on a tour of several Central American nations, as well as the Dominican Republic, over the next few days.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been on a visit to Panama, and he had a blunt message for his hosts on Sunday: end Chinese influence over the canal or face U.S. action. He didn't spell out what steps Panama should take or what Washington might do. Donald Trump has repeatedly insisted that Beijing is running the canal. He has vowed to retake control over it and refused to rule out the use of force. Also speaking on Sunday, he renewed the threat, but said military action probably wouldn't be required.
I don't think troops will be necessary in Panama. What Panama has done is terrible for national security for this part of the world. And, 70% of the signage on the Panama Canal was written in Chinese. That's not right. So it wasn't meant for China.
Trump says Panama has violated the agreement that saw the canal come under its control from 1999. After meeting Rubio, country President Jose Raul Mulino said he would review agreements involving China and Chinese firms. But he reiterated that his country's sovereignty over the waterway was not up for discussion. Key to the issue is a 25-year concession awarded to Hong Kong-based CK Hutchison, allowing it to operate ports at both ends of the canal. The contract has been targeted by US lawmakers as evidence of China's influence. Rubio has said Beijing could shut down the shipping route in the event of a conflict with the US. Panama rejects that idea, saying the canal is run by an independent body under its supervision, though Molino said he would review the Hutchison deal. China says it plays no part in running the trade route and has never interfered.
This isolated Native American reservation in New Mexico is battling an epidemic of overdose deaths. And it's happening as the country sees nationwide figures rapidly decline.
It almost took us apart.
Manuel Guerrero lives on the Alamo Navajo Reservation, one of the poorest in the country. In October 2022, his grandson Ambrose Begay died of a fentanyl overdose here, 125 yards from his front door. Ambrose said he felt alone after his father, stepfather, aunts, and friends died during the COVID pandemic.
It took terrible things into the family. Whenever he passed, not being angry, not being wanted to argument with the family.
The Alamo Navajo Reservation saw a 300% increase in overdose deaths from 2023 to 2024, preliminary data from the reservation's health center shows. But the U.S. saw its largest ever nationwide drop from August 2023 to August 2024, around a 22% decline in overdose deaths, according to preliminary data from the Centers for Disease Control. The Biden administration said that's partly down to the distribution of overdose reversal drug naloxone and more accessible addiction treatment. But the Alamo Navajo say they have been left out, and their younger generations are being hit hardest. Alamo Navajos come under the jurisdiction of numerous authorities: their tribe, the Navajo Nation, the county, state, and country. But sometimes they have difficulty getting support from anywhere. Many tribal members complained of a lack of resources from the Democratic-controlled Navajo Nation and the state of New Mexico.
And we're talking resources.
Michelle Pauline Abeta is a New Mexico House representative whose constituency includes Alamo.
When you visit Alamo, one of the striking things that you'll notice is the isolation of it. When hit with this epidemic, it's become a nightmare where resources have struggled to get to that community.
56% of the population live in poverty. Democratic State House Representative Tara Jaramillo went to school on the reservation, but is not a tribal member. Defeated in the November election by Republican Rebecca Dow, she says basic needs here are not being met.
Where are we starting at? We're not starting at, these children really need a strong reading program. That's a good idea. It's an amazing idea. These children don't have food. These children don't have running water. They may not feel safe at night.
She says reservation children turn to drugs to deal with generational trauma passed on from 19th century ethnic cleansing, as well as Indian boarding schools, COVID deaths, and parents' addictions.
It's the trauma that started everything off. Yeah, when I asked the same thing with all my cousins, like they're on drugs and everything, they say the same thing. It's because of trauma.
31-year-old tribal member Myrion Apachito has left Alamo Navajo, hoping to break his family's cycle of addiction.
What my mom would tell me is that it started from her parents giving her traumas is the reason why she started drinking. And because of me doing drugs, because my parents were always never there, and I was the only child that was supporting my little brother.
He now lives and works in Taos, New Mexico, where he did 7 months of rehab for his addiction to heroin, meth, and fentanyl.
This is where I begin a new life here, and decided just to stay here and start off fresh from here.
Tribal members and advocates told Reuters having police on the reservation would help reverse the trend. There are none right now. They said closer detox and rehabilitation centers that cater to Native Americans were also needed. Some hope change will come under U.S. President Donald Trump after his pre-election promise to stop fentanyl at the U.S.-Mexico border. He won the reservation and surrounding Socorro County in November, the first time in 36 years that the area backed a Republican presidential candidate. But those within the reservation are already taking action. Retiree Cecile Abeta was the Alamo Reservation's last full-time cop, now a member of its powerful school board. He is trying to set up a detox center and bring in federal and Navajo police to bust dealers.
There's got to be a solution to it. There can't be no solution to it because, it has to have an end to it somewhere.
US President Donald Trump says he will cut funding for South Africa over a new land expropriation policy. South Africa defended itself on Monday against attacks on the policy by Trump and his billionaire backer Elon Musk, who was born in South Africa. Without citing evidence, Trump said on Sunday, quote, certain classes of people in South Africa were being treated very badly.
That's under investigation right now. We'll make a determination. And until such time as we find out what South Africa is doing, they're taking away land, they're confiscating land, and actually they're doing things that are perhaps far worse than that.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said in a statement he looked forward to engaging with Trump to find a better and common understanding over the issue. Last month, he signed into law a bill that would make it easier for the state to expropriate land in the public interest. The law aims to address racial disparities in land ownership that persist 3 decades after apartheid's demise in 1994. Special conditions would have to be met for expropriation, such as the land having long-time informal occupants, being unused and held purely for speculation, or being abandoned. The Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources, Gwede Mantashe, struck a tougher line.
If they don't give us money, let's not give them minerals. But the reality, they take our minerals, but say why we're throwing funding. No, we have minerals.
Musk quickly waded in on the X platform he owns, responding to Ramaphosa's statement. Why do you have openly racist ownership laws, he asked. South Africa's foreign ministry responded to Trump by saying the act was not exceptional, and Ramaphosa said the government had not yet confiscated any land.
Canada will be responding to the U.S. trade action with 25% tariffs.
Canada and Mexico announced plans on Saturday to tax U.S. goods in retaliation to sweeping new 25% tariffs ordered by U.S. President Donald Trump on imports from their countries. It's a move economists say could lead to a trade war that risks reigniting inflation, with Trump also ordering a 10% tax on products from China. At a news conference, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said his country's tariffs on the U.S. would be similarly far-reaching, including everyday goods and consumer products. He warned Americans about what he called real consequences for them as well.
Tariffs against Canada will put your jobs at risk, potentially shutting down American auto assembly plants and other manufacturing facilities. They will raise costs for you, including food at the grocery store, gas at the pump.
Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum said she's ordered her economy minister to bring in tariff and non-tariff measures to defend her country's interests without giving details. In a post on X, Sheinbaum stressed her government does not want confrontation, but collaboration and dialogue. The United States is by far Mexico's most important foreign market, while Mexico overtook China in 2023 as the top destination for U.S. exports. In contrast to Canada and Mexico's direct retaliations, China gave a toned-down response on Sunday. The Chinese government denounced Trump's trade action, but left the door open for talks with Washington that could avoid a deepening conflict. China's Finance and Commerce ministries said Beijing will challenge the tariffs at the World Trade Organization, which is a symbolic gesture that poses no immediate cost or threat to Washington. They also said China will take unspecified countermeasures to the levies. Trump's tariffs will take effect on Tuesday to address what he called a national emergency of fentanyl and illegal immigration pouring into the U.S. In China's sharpest pushback on Sunday, its foreign ministry said the country has carried out extensive anti-narcotics cooperation with Washington, saying, quote, "Fentanyl is America's problem."
Everybody has to respect the sovereignty of all national states in the world, and that Greenland is today a part of the Kingdom of Denmark. It's a part of our territory, and it's not for sale. The chairman, the leader of Greenland, has been very clear that they are not for sale. I totally agree with the Americans that the High North, that the Arctic region is becoming more and more important when we're talking about defense and security and deterrence. And it is possible to find a way to ensure stronger footprints in Greenland. They are already there, and they can have more possibilities. And at the same time, we are willing to scale up from the Kingdom of Denmark. And I think NATO is the same. So if this is about securing our part of the world, we can find a way forward.
I greeted the Queen, I greeted her daughter. Already the next thing was meeting Luis Rubiales. We hugged. At that moment I told him what a mess we had made. And that was when he jumped up and down. And when he came back down, he said to me, "We won a World Cup thanks to you." And the next thing was with his hands on my ears, and next, the kiss. I felt that it was totally out of context, and I knew that I was being kissed by my boss, and that doesn't or shouldn't happen in any social or work environment.
o no debe de ocurrir en ningún ámbito social ni laboral. Me sentí poco respetada.
I felt disrespected. I think it was a moment that tainted one of the happiest days of my life. And for me, it is very important to say that at no time did I seek that act, and much less did I expect it, because I believe that my person was disrespected.
Mucho menos me lo esperé porque a mi persona creo que se le faltó respeto.
Завод взорвался, короче. Взрыв такой, блин. Я проснулся. Капец, короче, все горит тут. В первую очередь горит. Жесть. Проснулся от хлопка, короче. Валю на тайгу. Второй взрыв сейчас прогремел.
High up in the Dolomites, in the town of Cortina d'Ampezzo, the heat is on. The famous Italian ski resort is preparing to co-host the 2026 Winter Olympic Games, but there are concerns it won't all be ready in time. The town is up against a March deadline to complete a sliding centre for athletes booked in to test it for the first time. But finishing the centre, which will stage Olympic bob, skeleton and luge competitions, is giving local organisers a headache, especially because climate change has meant natural snow is in short supply. But despite the risk of losing the sliding events to the US's Lake Placid, which has been designated as a long-distance backup, Mayor Gianluca Lorenzi is staying positive.
There are backups for everything, but it's not worth taking them out. As of today, the plan B for the bob races does not exist because it has been made clear the sliding centre is being built here.
Although the International Olympic Committee had suggested using existing venues in neighbouring countries, the Veneto region and the national government ultimately opted for a full rebuilding of Cortina's Eugenio Monti track. Named after an Italian bobsleigh racer who won 2 silver medals at the last Winter Olympics held there in 1956, the revamped site has an estimated cost of $123 million. But critics argue it risks being a white elephant. Here's activist Marina Menardi.
We won't need the sliding centre because bobsleigh is a sport that no longer has any athletes, and it will be difficult, I would say impossible, to relaunch because it doesn't even have media exposure, and it is difficult to find sponsors. There are about 20 or so bobsleigh athletes and another 30 or so between luge and skeleton, so it's a sport that will have no future, and we will be saddled with it.
The return of the Games to Europe comes when climate change and rising temperatures are posing an existential threat to many of the region's traditional skiing centres. Some 90% of Italy's ski slopes rely on artificial snow, compared with 70% in Austria and 39% in France, according to environmental lobby Legambiente. And Cortina is no exception with its snow guns, but these methods are not sustainable in the long term. Preliminary research from the IOC has warned that only 10 nations will be able to host the Winter Games by 2040 due to climate change.
During our salvage surveys in preparation to lift the aircraft, additional remains were located and removed from the river and taken to the medical examiner's office. So far, 55 victims have been positively identified from this aircraft. from this accident. It is my belief that we're going to recover everyone. If we knew where they were, though, we would already have them out. So we have some work to do as the salvage operation goes on, and we will absolutely stay here and search until such point as we have everybody.
Taiwanese actor Bobby Hsu, who rose to fame across East Asia as the romantic lead in the 2001 soap opera Meteor Garden, has died of influenza aged 48 while on a family holiday in Japan. Her sister Di Hsu broke the news Monday, and it became the most sought-after topic on China's Weibo microblogging service. The sisters first found fame with their pop group SOS. Bobby Hsu became a household name from playing Shantai in the TV drama Meteor Garden, an adaptation of Japanese manga Boys Over Flowers. Hsu's character was a poor teenage girl who attends a school for wealthy students and encounters 4 spoiled, arrogant boys known as the F4. Beijing had banned Meteor Garden in 2002, describing the Taiwan-made soap as electronic heroin for young people. The late Hsu had been married to Korean rapper Koo Jun-yup, also known as DJ Koo, since 2022. She left behind 2 children from a previous marriage with Chinese entrepreneur Wang Xiaofei.
I came here today because I have a feeling that something is beginning to unravel, and I think that it's a good thing that we stand up now and don't leave it to our parliamentarians to stand up for democracy.
I think it's fair to say that this is a lose-lose trade war. Both US consumers and also Canadian and Mexican households stand to lose. The Tax Policy Center has just put out an analysis suggesting that after-tax US household income could fall by 1% as a result of these tariffs. That's a cost of about $1,000 to the average US household. Say if I am a US household that imports or that consumes Canadian maple syrup, that maple syrup is going to become more expensive, and that's a direct price increase that households will face. But also, if I buy goods that are domestically produced in the US, but that are produced using inputs from Canada, the price of those goods is also going to go up. So for households, really, there's many different ways you can be exposed, but all these effects lead to higher prices. So one possibility is that the higher tariffs are here to stay. The more hopeful possibility will be that governments realize the costs that these tariffs may impose and try to reach a negotiated solution to remove the tariffs. So I think the Canadian and Mexican governments will be trying to talk with their US counterparts and work out what kind of a deal could we reach that would allow both sides to remove the tariffs.
A number of vehicles, houses, garage doors were sprayed with highly offensive anti-Semitic graffiti. We then had a report by a number of young ladies who were at Bondi Beach last night. They were set upon by what we believe is the individuals from that silver Mazda, and a number of eggs were thrown at them in and around Bondi Beach. Certainly could be copycats. We will put all investigative resources into attempting to catch those offenders that are committing these offences. So I can assure you that every line of inquiry will be followed up. And as you can imagine, we're looking at hundreds and hundreds of hours of CCTV footage trying to track vehicles, persons for all of these matters.
We need to go on offense.
The Democratic National Committee elected Ken Martin as its new chair on Saturday as it looks to rebuild after the party's election loss to Donald Trump. Martin will be tasked with reversing the fortunes of a bruised and demoralized Democratic Party that not only lost control of the White House last November, but failed to win either the House or the Senate. Since then, the rudderless party has struggled to respond to Republican U.S. President Trump's barrage of executive orders, many of which reversed former President Joe Biden's policies.
We have one fight. The fight's not in here. The fight's out there, right? The fight's not in here. The fight is for our values. The fight is for working people. The fight right now is against Donald Trump and the billionaires who bought this country. That's the fight, not in here.
A longtime Democratic strategist in Minnesota, Martin had called for restoring and augmenting the party's national infrastructure in order to contest races across the country. He beat out Wisconsin Democratic Chair Ben Wickler on the first ballot.
Cowboy Carter. Beyonce.
I just feel very full and very honored. It's been many, many years. And I hope we just keep pushing forward, opening doors. God bless y'all. Thank you so much.
The aircraft climbed to about 1,500 feet above the ground. We were looking at GPS data on the aircraft, a slight right turn followed by a slight left turn, and then a steep descent towards the ground where it crashed. The entire flight lasted less than a minute.
So I want to stress this was a high-impact crash, and the plane is highly fragmented. There is a substantial impact on the entire community. The debris field extends 4 or 5 blocks, and I do want to stress that this is an active investigation scene. The debris is scattered. It is very dangerous, and we are still looking for the cockpit voice recorder. We have located the 2 engines, but for the cockpit voice recorder, we are still looking for it. It could be intact, but likely it is damaged. It may be fragmented.
U.S. President Donald Trump said on Saturday that Venezuela has agreed to receive all Venezuelan illegal migrants captured in the United States and pay for their transport. That includes gang members of Tren de Aragua, Trump said in a post on Truth Social. The Venezuelan government did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The announcement comes one day after White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Trump's envoy Richard Grenell was in Venezuela to work on this. Grenell on Friday made no comments on the gang members, but did say he was headed back to the United States with 6 American citizens. A surprise development after he met with Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in Caracas. Grenell did not name the 6 men shown with him aboard an airplane in this photo he posted online. 4 of them were dressed in light blue outfits used by the Venezuelan prison system. Trump cheered the move in his own post. It is unclear exactly how many Americans were being held by Venezuela, but Venezuelan officials have spoken publicly of at least 9. Maduro's officials have accused most of them of terrorism and said some were high-level mercenaries. The Venezuelan government regularly accuses members of the opposition and foreign detainees of conspiring with the U.S. to commit terrorism. U.S. officials have always denied any plots. Maduro told officials in an annual speech to the judiciary late on Friday evening that the meeting between him and Grenell had gone well.
Le decimos al presidente Donald Trump.
We tell President Trump that we've taken a first step, and hopefully it can be sustained. We want to maintain it.
The White House said Grenell's visit does not mean the United States recognizes Maduro as Venezuela's legitimate leader. The meeting comes as Trump has kicked off a sweeping immigration crackdown pledging mass deportations. Some 600,000 Venezuelans in the United States were eligible for deportation reprieves granted by the previous administration. But U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said she would cut the duration of the protections.
The picturesque town of Cetinje in Montenegro had a bloodied start to 2025. On January 1st, a gunman killed 13 people with an illegal firearm, then shot himself. The crime shook Vesna Petrovic. She lost her daughter and 2 grandsons in a mass shooting in 2022. This was another blow in her battle to reduce gun violence in the country.
U Crnoj Gori to tako vlada. Ovdje je dobiti oružje isto kao poći hleb da kupiš u nekom marketu.
The incidents highlight the challenges of eradicating violence in a region where the culture of weapons runs deep. Petrovic has lobbied politicians to bring in stricter gun controls in the small Balkan nation. And after this year's shooting, Montenegro's Prime Minister Miloš Spajić announced just that. But past measures across the region have had limited impact. While gun-related deaths have remained relatively steady, annual gun-related incidents in the Western Balkans rose more than 70% between 2019 and 2024, according to CSAC, a UN and EU-backed regional gun control initiative. Montenegro ranks 3rd globally in gun ownership per capita, data from the Small Arms Survey shows. The country's attitude to weapons stems from centuries of wars with Turks, Venetians, and Austrians.
Pretpostavljam da postoji određena da kažemo tradicija, znači da ne postoji kuća u Crnoj Gori koja nema oružje.
Vukoeta Vukotic is a local historian. In 1910, the king mandated that all male citizens buy a gasser pattern gun to bolster his small army and deter invaders.
Da, tačno je da to ima jako veliku genezu, ima veliku ukorijenjenost u crnogorskoj tradiciji, samim tim, znači pištolj, tačnije revolver, bio je smatran dijelom crnogorske tradicionalne nošnje.
Then, the breakup of Yugoslavia in the 1990s triggered a series of bloody ethnic conflicts that left 6 million surplus firearms in the region. Today, antique guns can be seen across Cetinje, like this church fence made of ancient musket barrels. Their cultural significance means arms controls are unpopular. When the Prime Minister announced his stricter gun control measures in January, he gave the owners of illegal weapons 2 months to freely hand them over. 3 weeks later, 1,535 weapons had been surrendered. Experts laud the effort, but it's thought up to 100,000 illegal weapons are still circulating in Montenegro, says a source at the Independent Police Union. The country already has a years-old gun amnesty program, but it has done little to stop access to the illegal market. And psychologist Radoje Serovic is skeptical of more recent attempts to control the problem.
Ta najava nekih drakonskih mjera, po mojem ličnom ubeđenju, može da dovede samo do još većeg skrivanja skrivenog oružja, te znači još većeg potanjanja u ilegalnost velike količine tog oružja.
Some implemented changes may help. In November, Western Balkans countries agreed to harmonize gun laws with the EU and clamp down on illicit weapons. But 3 experts told Reuters that even when governments pass stricter laws, many cash-strapped countries don't have the resources or sometimes the will to enforce the legislation. And in part, they say that's because the weapons trade is run by powerful criminal gangs. As for Petrovic, her campaigning helped introduce Marko and Massen's law after her dead grandsons. It never passed, but last month, a draft of tougher legislation was proposed. Her fight continues.
Investigators on Thursday recovered the so-called black boxes from the passenger plane that collided with a U.S. Army helicopter at a Washington airport a day earlier. A preliminary report about the incident is expected within 30 days. National Transportation Safety Board member Tom Inman said the military helicopter was also equipped, quote, with some form of recording devices, and those will be read either by DoD or by us, referring to the Department of Defense. He said the agencies have agreements to share data on those recorders. The crash, which killed 67 people and left no survivors, is the deadliest U.S. air disaster in more than 2 decades. The cause remains unclear. Radio communications showed that air traffic controllers alerted the helicopter about the approaching American Airlines jet and ordered it to change course. For aviation experts like Daniel Bubb, those details are difficult to square.
The air traffic controller apparently was talking to the helicopter pilot and said maintain visual separation from the American Airlines jet. And apparently that pilot acknowledged those instructions. So that's why I think this is very perplexing. It's hard to know. You know, did the helicopter pilot get confused? Was there a medical episode?
Reuters asked Mike Ginter, another aviation expert, whether he thought the accident could have been avoided.
I can tell you that the airspace in and around Washington, D.C. is the most restricted, regulated, controlled, complex airspace in the country. Any aircraft flying in that area is under direct and specific control of air traffic control, including that helicopter and that airliner. So if it's, the answer is yes, it was probably preventable, and that's exactly what the NTSB will uncover in their investigation.
Names of all the victims have not been released, but they included promising young figure skaters and people from Kansas, where the flight originated. Senator Maria Cantwell said that the dead also included citizens from Russia, the Philippines, and Germany. Chinese state media reported 2 Chinese citizens had been killed in the crash.
U.S. authorities on Friday restricted helicopter flights near Reagan Washington National Airport after a mid-air collision between an American Airlines passenger jet and a military helicopter killed 67 people. U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said the decision was made to ensure the safety of airplane and helicopter traffic in the area. The crash has cast a harsh spotlight on questions about air safety, a shortage of tower controllers at the Washington airport, and what comes next.
You know, my experience in aviation litigation, which I've done for 3 decades now, suggests that there will be legal actions filed.
Aviation attorney Brian Alexander.
It's extremely important for the families to know sooner rather than later what happened, exactly happened, why it happened, and what is the government going to do right away to make sure that this doesn't happen to any other family, because the depths of this type of trauma are indescribable.
The restrictions on helicopter flights will last, at least until the National Transportation Safety Board releases a preliminary report into the fatal collision, which typically takes 30 days. Authorities have not yet pinpointed a reason for the collision.
A medevac plane that crashed and exploded in a heavily populated area of Philadelphia on Friday was carrying a child and 5 others on board, including the child's mother. That's according to Jet Rescue Air Ambulance, the company that operated the aircraft. There were no survivors. 1 other person was killed and more than a dozen were injured on the ground, Philadelphia Mayor Sherrill Parker said at a news conference on Saturday.
We can also confirm that at least 1 other person perished in this tragedy, and this individual was in a car. We can confirm that there are also a number of other victims who were injured in this incident, and they are being treated in area hospitals. And thus far, our count is that there are 19 injured victims. But again, this is not etched in stone. The investigation is ongoing.
Video aired on local TV stations showed the plane in a sharp dive before hitting the ground and exploding in a massive fireball. LiveATC.net captured audio of air traffic controllers at Northeast Philadelphia Airport trying to get in touch with the aircraft.
Medevac Med Tango Sierra 056 Northeast Tower, how do you hear this transmission?
Medevac Med Service 056 Northeast Tower.
Condition 755, we have a lost aircraft. We're not exactly sure what happened, so we're trying to figure it out.
Officials said it was not clear what led to the crash. The weather was cold and rainy and with low visibility when the plane went down. Videos taken by witnesses and shared on social media showed body parts strewn about the streets and inside nearby homes. Residents said it has left them shaken.
The parking lot that we're standing in, I crossed through to get to my daughter's school. And to know that a plane crashed literally blocks away from my daughter's school, this is very devastating and very, very scary too.
The 6 people on board were Mexican, the country's president said in a post on X. Jet Rescue Air Ambulance is based in Mexico and licensed to operate in the U.S. A spokesperson for the company told CNN that the child was a girl on her way home with a final destination of Tijuana.